Hi guys, I finally got our new Read Aloud book in the mail yesterday. I had to order a copy because I did not have one. Miss Jones and Miss Deffenbaugh had a copy, but I didn't. So I finally got it in the mail, Flying Solo. It's a really, really good book. I read the blurb and the first chapter already just to kind of check it out, and I absolutely love it. This book is published by a company called Sandpiper, and so I have permission to read it and show video of it through the publishing company. I'm going to read the blurb to you guys first, and then we're going to dig into the first chapter. When the substitute for Mr. Fabiano's class never shows up, his 6th grade students are left on their own. Wanting to prove that they can run the class by themselves, they decide not to let anyone know that they are teacherless for the day. With a little bit of careful planning, things might go off without a hitch. But a fight breaks out between Bastien Fauvel and Rachel White over a classmate. Tommy Feathers, who died 6 months earlier. Rachel has communicated only by writing notes since Tommy's death. The class hasn't dealt with Tommy's absence, and now everything is falling apart. The school day isn't over yet. Will Mr. Fab's class keep flying solo or crush? And so when I read this blurb, I was like, oh, that's kind of familiar, because there's sometimes when Miss Gregory's absent and she has a sub, and for some reason the subs don't show up on time. And so then Mr. Tucker comes in and covers my class a little bit sometimes. Or you guys might have Miss Lyle or Miss Kate or even Miss Mary come in and cover my class for a little bit until the sub shows up, because sometimes they're late. And so I think this book is really relatable to us because sometimes our substitutes just don't show up. And then we have to figure something else out. And so I'm going to dig into the first chapter. Now, Miss Jones and Miss Deffenbaugh warned me a little bit and said that in this book, we meet lots and lots of characters. And so remember back at the beginning of our historical fiction unit, we talked about that when the author introduces us to new characters, that we have to keep track of those characters. We have to think about, okay, what is that character's name? What are they like? What do we picture them like? Okay, so I'm going to kind of make a little running chart in one of my notebooks to kind of keep track of and show you guys that I'm keeping track of these characters so that we can talk about them. Chapter 1, 7:03 a.m. Rachel White. Rachel lay in bed reading, waiting until the very last possible minute when she absolutely had to put down her book and get out of bed. Many people believe that it is the air passing under the wings that supports the plane as it flies, she read. In fact, it is the air passing over the wings that provides the lift that keeps the airplane in the air. Rachel, Mom yelled, come on, gal, shake a leg. Rachel sighed and looked up from her book at the posters around her bedroom. Amelia Earhart, Charles Lindbergh, Sally Ride, John Glenn. It was hard to believe that they all had to go to school, too. Rachel swung her legs out of the bed and stumbled into the bathroom. She didn't look forward to school much these last 6 months. There wasn't much to enjoy, except Mr. Fabiano. And so, first character we've met is Rachel White. And we've only made it through just the very first page of the chapter. But as you can see, Rachel likes to read, but she doesn't like school very much so far. Okay, so in my notebook, I'm going to be keeping track. And so I'm going to write Rachel. She likes reading, but not into school. Now, it says that she's not into school right now. And so as you can see, Rachel, she likes reading, but she's not into school right now. Now, it didn't say that she doesn't like school at all. It just says that she's not into school right now. So I wonder if maybe there's something there that's causing her to not like it right now. He was by far the greatest teacher she had ever had. Smart and funny and simply gorgeous, with his black, black eyes that could always find a place deep inside her. She had a crush on him. All right, not that she was alone. Most of the other sixth grade girls had crushes on Mr. Fab. Now, she described him as having black, black eyes. Now, I remember back in Tiger Rising at the beginning of the year that they described that Sistine had black, black eyes. And so that we know that when an author repeats words, that's always something that we need to note and remember, because that's important. She would never call him that nickname. No way. It made her think of Fab laundry detergent. She would always think of him as Mr. Fabiano. Rachel leaned forward to wash her face with cold water. She brushed her teeth, rinsed her mouth, and cleared her throat. The guttural sound startled her. There was a hint of her voice in that sound, and she had not heard her voice in the past 6 months. Meaning she hasn't talked in 6 months. So that's something that we need to note that's important too. So I'm going to add that she hasn't talked in 6 months. She remembered the day that it happened. Tommy Feathers, a kid in her 6th grade class, had brought to class some raspberry pies he made at his parents' bakery. Tommy had brought a wedge of pie for everyone, but he put the biggest piece of pie on Rachel's desk. To me, why would he give her the biggest piece? It seems to me that he might have a crush on her. Tommy smiled at her. He had a rather big head and an annoying habit of humming loudly in class. He was a little slow. Already he had been kept back twice, so he was 2 years older than anybody else in 6th grade. It was no secret that he was in love with her. Every day he tried to give her cards, stories, seashells, and now this huge chunk of raspberry pie. She tried not to be mean, but sometimes he really got on her nerves. And so she's saying that he's always giving her things and always trying to talk to her, and she doesn't really like him because he gets on her nerves. "I don't like sweets," she said, pushing the pie back toward him. Well, that doesn't seem very nice. I mean, Tommy was just being nice to her, trying to be nice, trying to show that he liked her, and she pushes it away. And that, to me, I mean, that's showing that she's being very rude. She could have at least been thankful and said, "Thank you, but I don't like pies." After school, Tommy showed up at her house, something he had never done before. "I made you a whole pie," he said, grinning and holding it out to her. A whole pie made from yellow strawberries. They're like gold. Gold is my favorite color. "Golden strawberries?" Mom explained. Golden strawberries, Mom exclaimed. "Really? How marvelous! I've never heard of such a thing." "We picked them in New Hampshire," Tommy explained, still flashing that foolish grin. "In New Hampshire?" "I told you I don't like pie," Rachel told Tommy. "I don't eat sweets. How many times do I have to tell you?" So here's Tommy coming to her house, bringing her a whole pie. And he's just doing this in hopes that maybe she'll like him back, or maybe she'll even talk to him. And he's standing here at the door giving this pie to her and her mom, and here Rachel is, "I don't like pie. I told you that." Imagine how that makes Tommy feel. To me, if I were doing that, I would feel sad and I would feel embarrassed. And so I imagine that Tommy's probably feeling the same way. And I imagine maybe like his facial expression, very drawn. He might be looking at the ground. He doesn't want to look at anybody in the eye because he's just embarrassed right now. Tommy lowered his eyes a bit and bit his lower lip. "Well, I certainly do," Mom said, taking the pie from him. "Thank you, Tommy. I'm going to enjoy every bite." That was on October 28th. Next morning, her best friend Missy phoned her to tell her the news. Tommy Feathers was dead. So she's learning now that Tommy died, and the last thing that she said or even did with him was to be rude. "He died in his sleep," Missy said. "Oh my gosh," Rachel whispered into the telephone. She stared at the TV. A stupid cop show. A detective had just handcuffed a suspect, and the man looked guilty. Scruffy beard, haunted eyes, wild hair. The detective started to read the man his rights. "You have the right to remain silent," he began. "What does that mean?" the suspect interrupted. "It means you have the right to be quiet," the detective snapped. "Now, hush and listen." Rachel was half aware of Missy's voice in her ear talking over the telephone, but she couldn't get beyond those 5 words. The right to remain silent. She could see them in her head. The right to remain silent. "What happened?" Mom asked when Rachel put the phone down, and Rachel tried to answer. She tried to say it. "Tommy Feathers is dead." She reached deep down inside herself to find those words, but they were cold when she touched them. Frozen. She knew those words could never fly. Things got pretty crazy after that. Mom talked to her, pleaded, begged, cried. That night, and for many nights after, Mom held Rachel in her arms. Mom wept and talked and begged some more. "Why won't you talk to your mother?" Mom asked. "I can't," Rachel wrote on a small pad of paper. Oh my gosh. Her last word was gosh. And so she hasn't spoken since she heard the news about Tommy dying. Why doesn't she want to talk? Is she sad about Tommy's death? Is she just totally embarrassed about the way that she acted? That she feels like she can't talk? We don't really know. We just know that ever since she heard that news, she hasn't said a word. All she does is write on paper. Her father telephoned all the way from his cattle ranch in New Mexico. Rachel held the phone against her cheek and tried to picture him. The hat, expensive boots, while she was listening to his voice. "I don't get it," he said. "A boy in your class dies and you stop talking? It makes no sense. What's the connection?" Rachel breathed into the phone. Mom set up appointments with counselors, psychologists, therapists. A specialist named Dr. Bang Jensen diagnosed her as a selective mute, a person who chooses not to speak. She explained to Rachel and her mother that often this kind of reaction is caused by some kind of profound emotional trauma. The condition is temporary, the doctor said, usually. So she's been diagnosed as a selective mute, and the doctor says that it happens because of an emotional trauma. And Tommy dying is definitely an emotional trauma. It was a classmate that she knew. Even though she didn't like him a whole lot, he was still a friend, and he died. And so that's her trauma. Sometimes Mom wrote notes too. They'd make a pot of tea and sit at the kitchen table, both of them silent, writing back and forth. "I'm so worried about you." "I'm okay, Mom." "Your father said it's as if your voice died along with that poor boy." I told him, your voice isn't dead. It's only sleeping. Maybe. Or maybe it's just frozen. There must be some way to thaw it out. Writing notes back and forth helped to reassure Mom a tiny bit. But now there was a panicky light in her eyes. The doorbell rang. It was Missy, come to walk her to school. Hi, Missy, Mom said. Hi, Mrs. White, Missy said. Mom turned back to look at Rachel. You look terrific, she said. You always look smashing in that skirt. Rachel leaned into Mom's hug. Keep your eyes peeled on the way to school, Mom whispered. Okay, honey? And if you happen to spot that voice of yours lying on the ground, well, pick it up and bring it home. Rachel closed her eyes and nodded. Mom said the same thing, word for word, every morning. So, Mom just wants her daughter to talk again. And so each day she's saying the same thing over and over in hopes that she might come home and talk. And so in this chapter, we met Rachel. And so we know that Rachel, she likes to read. She doesn't like school right now. She hasn't talked in 6 months. She has a crush on her teacher. And we know that the reason that she stopped talking was because that Tommy died. Now, we don't know a whole lot about Rachel just yet, but to me, it seems like Rachel's dealing with a lot of emotional stuff, and I think that she probably feels bad for the way that she treated Tommy before he died. So I want you to maybe think about, what type of character do you think Rachel is, or maybe that she's going to be in the book? You can make a prediction of what type of character you think Rachel's going to be. Remember, a character trait. So, like, do we think she's going to be a kind character? Do we think she's going to be a courageous character? Do we think she's going to be a kind of just a character that is pushed off to the side a little bit and not very outgoing? I want you guys to make that prediction. Might be right, you might be wrong, you don't know. Make your prediction in the comments, and then we will read chapter 2 of Flying Solo tomorrow. See you guys later.